Sam always believed that land was more than just soil and trees. For him, it was memory, family, and the promise of a future. His land rested on the quiet edge of a growing town, surrounded by tall pines and a clear stream that ran through the back corner. His father had worked the ground before him, and his grandfather had planted the first fence posts. To Sam, it was more than property. It was home. But Sam was also a soldier. When duty called, he had to leave everything behind. The military needed him overseas for a deployment that would last nearly 2 years. Before leaving, he stood on the front porch of his cabin, looking at the horizon as the sun went down. The air was still, and the sound of the stream carried through the evening. He whispered to himself, "This land will still be here when I return." Before leaving, Sam signed papers with the local homeowners association, known as the HOA. They had rules about the road, the gates, and how the landowners kept their property. He never liked their strict ways, but they were supposed to watch over the neighborhood while he was gone. With that thought, Sam packed up, hugged his neighbors goodbye, and went to serve his country. Months passed into seasons. Sam's life became filled with long days, night patrols, and the weight of his uniform. He wrote letters when he could, telling his mother and sister back home that he missed them. But deep inside, he found comfort knowing that one day he would return to his land and the life he left behind. Back home, though, change was brewing. The HOA board had gained new members, people who were not from the old community but from the city. They wanted money, not memories. They looked at Sam's land and saw profit. They saw the stream and thought of selling it as a private park. They saw the open ground and imagined houses standing where Sam's cabin had been. When Sam was away, the HOA claimed his land fees were unpaid. In truth, the letters they sent were delayed, lost in the shuffle of military mail. Instead of waiting or reaching out, they acted fast. They filed papers, moved through local offices, and declared his land abandoned. Without his knowledge, they put it up for sale. A small group of developers bought it, guided by the HOA's hand. They divided it into plots and told new families they could soon build their homes there. What was once Sam's pride and family history now appeared on maps as someone else's property. Sam knew nothing of this. Far away, he stood in the desert with sand under his boots, speaking with fellow soldiers about home. He often told them about his land, the stream, and the smell of pine after rain. His friends would smile and say they wanted to visit one day. One evening, while sitting near a camp light, Sam received a package from his sister. Inside were letters and a photo of the cabin. But tucked behind the photo was a note that chilled his heart. It read, "Sam, the HOA is saying they sold your land. I don't know how. Please come home when you can." His chest grew heavy, and he read the words again and again. His hands shook with anger, but there was nothing he could do at that moment. The mission had to be completed. He had to wait, though waiting felt like fire burning inside him. Days turned into weeks, and finally his deployment ended. When the plane landed back on home soil, Sam carried his pack and looked forward to the moment he would walk across his field again. But when he drove down the familiar road toward his property, he saw something that stopped his breath. Strange fences had been placed where his own fence once stood. Wooden signs marked lots with numbers. A bright board near the entrance read, "Future Homes, brought to you by HOA Development." Sam's cabin was still standing, but it looked lonely and surrounded by survey markers. His land was no longer his in the eyes of those who now claimed it. His heart pounded, his jaw tightened, and he stepped out of the truck with his boots pressing hard against the dirt that should have been his alone. Neighbors came out quietly to watch. Some nodded in sympathy, while others looked away, not wanting to be caught in the storm. The HOA members stood at the edge of the road, wearing polished shoes and holding clipboards. One of them, a man with sharp glasses, said calmly, "You must be Sam. You should know this land now belongs to the association. You failed to keep up with the terms. Sam looked at him, his eyes steady. The weight of his service, the months of sacrifice, and the betrayal of trust all mixed into one burning thought. He said slowly, "We'll see about that." That was the moment the fight began. Sam was not only a soldier of the land but also of honor. And this time, his battlefield was not in a desert across the sea. It was here, on the soil his family had kept for generations. Sam stood on the edge of his own field, the ground firm under his boots, yet it felt as if the earth had been pulled away from him. The board members of the HOA stood across from him with their polished shoes and fine suits. They carried themselves like owners, not caretakers. The man with glasses stepped forward again. His name was Martin, the new head of the HOA. His voice was smooth but sharp, like someone who had said the same speech many times before. "You were gone too long, Sam," Martin said. "The association sent notices. You did not respond. Fees were unpaid. Rules are rules. The land was declared abandoned. We acted within our rights." Sam's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice steady. "I was on duty. Serving the country. You knew that." Martin pushed his glasses up and gave a half smile. "We do not handle military matters. We handle property. The land is no longer yours. Families have already signed contracts. Soon, houses will stand here. You should move on." The words stung, but Sam did not answer right away. He looked around and saw neighbors watching from porches and behind fences. Some looked sorry for him, others nervous, but no one spoke. The HOA held power, and fear kept mouths closed. Sam turned his eyes back to Martin. "This land is mine, and you know it. You did not protect it. You stole it." For the first time, Martin's smile faded. He stepped back and nodded to the others. "If you stay here without permission, we will call law enforcement. This is private property now." Sam walked back to his truck. He did not shout, he did not argue further. But inside, a storm was building. As he drove away, his eyes stayed on the land in the mirror, the cabin shrinking into the distance. He swore he would not let it end this way. Sam parked at his sister's house that evening. She rushed outside to meet him, worry written across her face. "I tried to fight it, Sam. I called offices, I wrote letters. But the HOA pushed through the sale so quickly. They made it look legal." Sam hugged her and whispered, "You did what you could. Now it's my turn." Over dinner, they spoke about what had happened. The HOA claimed missed fees, but the truth was simple. The letters had never reached him overseas, and the HOA knew it. They had used his service as a chance to strip him of his rights. Sam sat in silence for a long time. His fork rested on the plate, untouched. Finally, he said, "I fought for this country, and they think they can take my home while I'm away. If they believe I'll let it go, they're wrong." The next morning, Sam returned to town. He walked into the local courthouse to ask for records. The clerks looked nervous, almost apologetic. One finally admitted, "The HOA pressured us. They filed the papers fast. Too fast. We thought you might contest it later, but when no one came forward, the judge signed it." Sam nodded, though his jaw tightened. He asked for copies of every paper, every file, every signature. He carried them out in a thick folder. Later, he drove back toward his cabin. From a distance, he saw surveyors measuring the ground. They wore bright vests and carried tall poles. He parked his truck by the road and walked closer. One of the men looked up. "Sir, you're not supposed to be here. This area is being prepared for development." Sam's voice was calm but firm. "This is my land. You're standing where my grandfather worked the soil." The man shifted uncomfortably. "We're just doing our job. The HOA gave orders." Sam looked at the cabin again. It stood like a soldier left behind, lonely but strong. He felt the weight of history in every board and stone. His heart hardened with resolve. That evening, Sam met with old friends from the military who lived nearby. They sat together in a small diner, the sound of plates and chatter around them. Sam told them the whole story, how the HOA had acted, how they sold his land, how strangers now measured the fields where he once walked. His friend Mark shook his head. They did this while you were deployed? That's low. Real low. Another friend, Ben, leaned forward. You're not alone, Sam. We've got your back. You served with honor. They don't get to take what's yours. Sam felt strength in their words. He realized this was not only his fight but a fight for every soldier who left home to serve and trusted that home would be waiting. The next day, Sam stood once more on the edge of his land. The HOA board gathered again, this time with more members. Martin raised his voice across the field. You need to understand, Sam. The land is gone. If you continue to interfere, there will be consequences. Sam's eyes locked on his. His voice was steady, calm, yet it carried the weight of steel. I do understand, Martin. And you need to understand something too. This land was never yours to sell. And I will take it back. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Martin forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. He tried to wave the moment away, but the firmness in Sam's tone left a mark. As Sam walked back to his truck, he knew the battle had only begun. He had files, he had truth, and he had allies. The HOA had power on paper, but Sam had something stronger. He had loyalty, honor, and the will to fight. And in his heart, he knew one thing: the HOA had made a grave mistake. They had not just taken land. They had challenged a soldier who had never lost a fight. Sam woke before sunrise. Sleep did not come easy these days. He sat on the porch of his sister's small house, holding a mug of coffee and staring at the faint light growing in the east. The land was all he could think about. Every hour that passed, surveyors marked more lines, and developers moved closer to building on the place his family had worked for generations. But Sam was not a man who gave up. In the service, he had learned patience and strategy. He had learned that battles were not won with anger but with planning. And this battle, though different from the deserts overseas, was just as important. When the sun rose, he gathered his papers, the copies of the land sale documents, the HOA notices, and the signatures of officials who had rushed the process. He spread them out on the kitchen table. His sister sat with him, helping him sort through the details. Look at this, she said, pointing at a line. They listed your fees as unpaid for almost a year before you left. That's not true. I remember you mailed a check right before deployment. Sam leaned closer. If that's true, then this sale was based on false records. They built their case on a lie. His sister nodded. You'll need proof. A bank record, something that shows the payment went through. Sam wrote it down in a small notebook. He would not forget any detail. Later that day, he met with his old military friends again at the diner. Mark and Ben were waiting at a booth, and two others had joined: Paul, who worked as a county officer, and Daniel, who had studied law after leaving the service. Sam explained everything he had discovered. Daniel studied the papers carefully. His brow furrowed as he flipped through the pages. This doesn't look right, Daniel said. They moved too fast. The court should have given you notice, real notice, not just letters they knew you couldn't get. You were deployed. That makes this case very different. Paul nodded. And if they filed false records about payments, that's even worse. I can help you pull official bank records if you give me the dates. Sam felt a spark of hope. His team was forming, just as it had in service. Different roles, different skills, but the same sense of unity. Mark leaned back in his chair. We'll need more than papers. We'll need people. Your neighbors are afraid, but if they see you standing strong, they might speak out. Sam nodded slowly. Then that's where I'll start. I'll talk to them. One by one. That evening, Sam walked through the neighborhood. He knocked on doors, spoke to old families, and asked questions. At first, most were hesitant. They glanced over their shoulders, as if worried the HOA might hear them. But when Sam explained how his land had been sold while he was overseas, some began to whisper their own frustrations. An elderly woman named Martha leaned on her cane and said, "They fined me for planting flowers outside the approved colors. I paid because I didn't want trouble. But it's wrong, what they did to you." Wrong. A young father shook his head. "They charge us for road repairs that never happen. We all know it, but we can't fight them alone." Sam listened carefully to each story. He wrote notes in his little book, just as he had done with his own case. By the time the night fell, he had spoken with more than a dozen neighbors. Some were too scared to help, but others quietly promised to stand with him. 2 days later, Sam and his friends met again, this time at Paul's garage. It was quieter than the diner, away from eyes and ears. They spread the papers on a workbench. Daniel pointed at the signature of the judge. This was rushed. The HOA wanted it signed before anyone could challenge it. "If we file properly, we can argue that the sale should be frozen until a full hearing." Paul handed Sam a folder. "Here's proof of your payment before deployment. The bank record clears it. They lied about your debt." Sam felt a surge of strength. Every piece of evidence was like another weapon in his hands. This was not just defense anymore. This was the start of offense. "We'll file the challenge," Daniel said. "But while the court moves, we need to keep pressure on them in the neighborhood. The HOA rules are only strong if people believe in them. If neighbors start speaking out, the board will feel the cracks." Mark grinned. "I can help with that. Let's get the people talking." The following week, Sam returned to his cabin site. Surveyors were gone, but the bright signs advertising future homes still stood tall. He walked up to one and pulled it out of the ground. Then he planted himself on the porch of his cabin, sitting in a chair like a guard. When the HOA members arrived, led by Martin, they stopped at the sight of him. "You can't stay here," Martin said sharply. "This is trespassing." Sam rose slowly to his feet. His voice was calm but carried across the open field. "This is my land. I have proof. And I will fight you every step until it's mine again." Martin's face darkened. "You'll regret this." Sam met his eyes without fear. "I've faced worse than you." The board members whispered among themselves, uneasy. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. As Sam watched them leave, he knew the plan was working. He was not only defending his land. He was sending a message. He was back, and he would not be pushed aside. The battle had just begun, but Sam was ready. He had friends, proof, and the will to fight. The HOA had power, but he had something stronger, the heart of a soldier who would never abandon what was his. The morning air was crisp as Sam stood on the porch of his cabin. The cabin itself looked worn but strong, the same way Sam felt. 4 days now, he had stayed on the property, showing everyone that he would not be moved. His truck was parked out front, his boots left marks in the dirt around the cabin, and neighbors saw that he was not afraid. Some came quietly in the evenings. Martha, the elderly woman with her cane, brought him warm bread and whispered, "You remind me of your grandfather. He never let anyone push him around." A young couple brought their children to meet him. They explained how the HOA had fined them for small things like leaving toys in the yard. They felt trapped, but seeing Sam stand so firm gave them courage. Sam listened to all of them. He wrote their stories down in his notebook, the same way he wrote his own. Each story was another piece of truth. Each voice was another sign that the HOA was not as untouchable as it pretended to be. Meanwhile, the HOA was not staying quiet. Martin called a special meeting in the community hall. The board members sat at a long table, papers stacked in neat piles before them. Behind them hung a large banner with the HOA's name, as if it were a crown over their heads. Martin raised his voice so all could hear. We must keep order. The association exists to protect property values. If we let one man break the rules, soon all will break. We cannot allow the soldier to defy us. A woman on the board nodded. He is making people think they can stand against us. We must act quickly. Martin's eyes narrowed. Then we raise the pressure. Fines, warnings, whatever it takes. If neighbors join him, we punish them too. The board agreed. Their plan was not to seek fairness but to crush resistance with fear. The next day, letters appeared in mailboxes across the neighborhood. They warned of heavy fines for unauthorized gatherings, unapproved yard decorations, and failure to maintain appearance. Some neighbors panicked, but others brought the letters straight to Sam. He sat on his porch as they handed him the papers. He read each one and smiled calmly. This is fear, nothing more. They want to scare you into silence. Martha raised her chin. Well, I'm too old to be scared. If they find me, I'll bring the letter to you. The young couple nodded. We're tired of hiding. If they find us, so be it. Sam felt pride swell in his chest. The people were beginning to rise, little by little. That evening, Sam and his military friends gathered at Paul's garage again. The group had grown. Now, some neighbors joined too. They spoke about unfair rules, surprise fines, and years of frustration. Daniel, the law student, laid out the plan. We have enough evidence now to show abuse of power. But while we prepare the case, we must keep the community strong. The HOA will try to break us with fear. We must answer with unity. Ben leaned forward. We know how to stand together. That's what we were trained for. We'll hold the line. Sam looked around the room, seeing the faces of neighbors and friends. He realized something important. This was no longer just his fight. It was the fight of an entire community. The HOA had made enemies out of its own people. Days passed, and the tension grew. Sam's presence on the land became a symbol. Children waved to him as they walked by. Neighbors nodded from porches. Even those too afraid to speak openly felt stronger seeing him there. But the HOA did not back down. One afternoon, as Sam worked on repairing the old fence, Martin arrived with 2 security guards hired by the board. They stood tall, trying to look official. Martin called out, "You are trespassing. This land belongs to the association. Leave now or face arrest." Sam straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice was steady. "I am not leaving. I have proof this land is mine, and I will show it in court." Martin's face turned red. "You think the court will side with you? We have power. We have money. You are just one man." Sam took a step closer, his boots firm on the dirt. "I am not just one man. Look around, Martin. People are tired of your lies. They are tired of your rules. And they will stand with me." Neighbors gathered nearby, drawn by the raised voices. One by one, they came closer, standing behind Sam. Martha with her cane, the young couple with their children, and more from the street. Their presence made Martin falter. For the first time, the balance shifted. It was not the HOA facing one soldier. It was the HOA facing a community. That night, Sam sat by the cabin fire pit. His friends joined him, and neighbors brought food. The air was filled with quiet laughter and the sound of voices sharing hope. Sam looked at the glow of the fire and thought about all he had seen overseas. Battles were fought with weapons, but victories were won with unity and heart. He knew the fight was far from over. The HOA still held papers, money, and lawyers. But Sam now had something stronger: the trust of his community. He lifted his eyes to the dark sky, stars shining above the trees, and whispered, "We're ready." And with that, the plan for the next step began to form in his mind. The days that followed were filled with unease. The neighborhood felt different. Some homes glowed with quiet hope, while others shut their doors tightly in fear of the HOA. But everywhere people talked, and every talk circled back to one name: Sam. The HOA board, led by Martin, did not stay silent. They hired lawyers from the city and filed a new order demanding Sam's removal. Papers were posted on the gate of his cabin, warning him of trespassing, interference, and property damage. Sam pulled the papers down and studied them carefully. His jaw clenched, but his mind stayed calm. He had faced worse threats on foreign soil. This was a battlefield of ink and words, and he would not lose. He carried the papers to Daniel, the law student who had been helping him. Daniel read through them, shaking his head. "They're overreaching. They're trying to scare you. But with the proof we've gathered, we can fight back. I'll draft the response." Sam nodded. "Do it. The court will hear our side." That night, Sam made a call to an old commander from his service days. His voice was steady but carried the weight of betrayal. "Sir, I returned from deployment to find my land taken by an HOA. They claim it was abandoned. They sold it while I was away. I have proof they lied." There was silence on the line, then the commander spoke. "That's outrageous. You served your country, and they dared to do this while you were gone? Send me everything. I'll see what strings I can pull." Sam knew he could not rely fully on favors, but he also knew the military took care of its own. His commander promised to reach out to contacts in government and veteran support groups. If the HOA thought Sam was fighting alone, they were wrong. The next day, the HOA struck harder. Trucks arrived at the edge of the land, carrying supplies for development. Workers began digging holes for posts. When Sam stepped out to confront them, Martin appeared with a smug smile. "You can't stop progress, Sam," Martin said. "You're standing in the way of growth. Soon this place will be filled with families, and your little cabin will be gone." Sam's voice was calm but firm. "You can bring all the trucks you want, but until the court decides, you're building on land that isn't yours." Martin laughed. "By the time the court decides, it will be too late." Sam did not argue further. Instead, he walked back to his cabin and made another call. Within an hour, two of his military friends arrived: Mark and Ben. They parked their vehicles beside his truck and sat with him on the porch. From that moment, the workers refused to cross the line. They saw the soldiers sitting there, steady and silent, and they hesitated. The HOA had power on paper, but Sam had presence on the ground. Meanwhile, Daniel filed the first legal motion. The documents challenged the sale and requested an immediate freeze on all development. Copies were delivered to the county office, the courthouse, and even the HOA. Word spread quickly. Neighbors whispered that Sam was taking the HOA to court. Some began to slip notes of support under his door. One note read, "We believe in you. Don't give up." Another said, "Thank you for standing for all of us." Sam kept each note, tucking them into his notebook alongside the stories he had collected. A week later, the first hearing was scheduled. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Sam walked in, wearing a plain suit. Behind him were his friends, his sister, and even Martha with her cane. A small crowd of neighbors filled the benches. Across the aisle, Martin sat with the HOA board and their lawyers in dark suits. They whispered among themselves, confident in their money and influence. The judge entered, and the room grew silent. Papers were presented, arguments made. Daniel spoke with steady confidence, pointing out the bank records that proved Sam had paid his fees. He showed the rushed timeline of the sale, the lack of proper notice, and the HOA's false claims. The HOA lawyers argued back, but cracks appeared in their case. The judge raised an eyebrow more than once at the speed of their actions. At the end of the session, the judge gave the first decision. Until this case is resolved, development on the disputed land is frozen. No further construction is allowed. The HOA board shifted uncomfortably. Sam felt a weight lift from his chest. The battle was not won, but the land was safe for now. Outside the courthouse, neighbors cheered quietly. Martha gripped Sam's hand. "You did it, son. You stopped them." Sam shook his head. "Not yet. This is only the beginning. They'll fight harder now." Mark clapped him on the shoulder. "Then we'll fight harder too." Sam looked around at the faces of his neighbors, his friends, and his sister. He realized something powerful. This was not just about land anymore. It was about justice, about standing against those who abused power. As he climbed into his truck, Sam felt determination burn inside him. The HOA had money, but he had truth. And he had soldiers, neighbors, and a growing tide of support. The war was far from over, but Sam was ready for the next battle. The freeze order from the judge gave Sam and the community a wave of relief. Trucks stopped coming to his land, workers stayed away, and the bright development signs leaned useless against the fence. For the first time, the HOA had been forced to pause. But Sam knew it was not the end. The HOA was wounded, and wounded men often struck back harder. Within a week, their counterattack began. Thick envelopes arrived at several homes. They were filled with fines, charges for minor issues like grass height, mailbox color, or paint chipping on shutters. The numbers were higher than ever before. A father of 3 came to Sam's cabin holding a letter in his shaking hand. "They want to fine me $500 because my garbage can was at the curb too long. Sam, I can't pay this. If I fight, they'll threaten to take my home." Sam read the letter slowly, then looked the man in the eyes. "You're not alone anymore. They can't scare all of us if we stand together." That evening, Sam called another meeting at Paul's garage. The place was crowded now, with neighbors filling every corner. Some came out of anger, others out of fear, but all wanted answers. Sam stood in the center, his voice calm but steady. "The HOA is trying to break us. They think fear will scatter us. But remember this: the judge already froze their development. That happened because we stood together. If we stay united, they cannot crush us." Martha raised her cane high. "Then let them fine me. I'll frame the letter and hang it on my wall." The room filled with quiet laughter, and tension lifted. People began sharing stories of unfair fines, each one adding fuel to the fire of resistance. For the first time in years, the community was no longer silent. Meanwhile, Martin grew restless. He paced the HOA office late into the night. His board members were nervous, their confidence fading. One woman whispered, "People are turning against us. Maybe we should offer Sam a settlement, give him part of the land back." Martin slammed his hand on the table. "No. If we give in, we lose everything. This is not about his land anymore, it's about control. If he wins, every family will think they can challenge us." His voice dripped with anger. "We'll find another way to push him out." The next week, Sam received a notice taped to his cabin door. It claimed the HOA would be seeking criminal charges for threatening behavior and illegal gatherings. Sam held the paper, his face calm though his heart burned. He carried it straight to Daniel. Daniel read it and shook his head. "This won't hold. It's a scare tactic. But it shows how desperate they're getting. We'll file another response in court." Sam nodded, but he also made another call to his old commander. Within days, something remarkable happened. Veterans from across the county began showing up at Sam's cabin. Some wore caps with their unit names, others came in plain clothes, but all carried the same spirit. They shook Sam's hand, stood with him on the porch, and promised support. One veteran said, "We know what it means to come home and find things not as they should be. You're not fighting alone." The sight of veterans gathering at the cabin spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Families felt safer. Children waved American flags as they walked by. The HOA tried to paint Sam as a troublemaker, but the image of soldiers standing guard over a family cabin told a different story. Frustrated, Martin arranged for a private security team to patrol the area. Black SUVs rolled slowly down the street at night, their lights glaring into yards. The message was clear: intimidation. But Sam was not intimidated. One night, when the SUVs stopped near his cabin, he walked out with 3 veterans by his side. They stood silently, arms crossed, eyes firm. The SUVs lingered, then rolled away without a word. The neighbors watched from windows and porches. For many, that was the moment fear broke. If Sam could stand tall under pressure, so could they. The next court date arrived. This time, the courthouse was even more crowded. Local reporters had caught the story, and the headline read, "Soldier Fights HOA for Family Land." Inside, the judge listened to both sides again. Daniel presented new evidence: bank statements, false fines, and testimonies from neighbors who had suffered under the HOA. Each piece painted a picture not just of one stolen property, but of years of abuse. The HOA lawyers tried to dismiss it, but their arguments grew weaker. The judge frowned more than once at the HOA's tactics. At the end of the session, the judge spoke firmly. "This case is larger than one piece of land. It concerns the behavior of the HOA as a whole. Until final judgment, all actions against Mr. Sam and his neighbors are suspended. No fines, no threats, no development." The room erupted with gasps. The HOA board sat pale and silent. Sam felt his chest swell with relief. He had won another step forward. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered around him. Children hugged his legs, and Martha placed a proud hand on his arm. "You've given us hope, Sam," she said softly. "For the first time in years, I feel free." Sam smiled, though his eyes stayed serious. "We're not finished yet. They'll keep fighting. But now we know we can win." The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the street. For the first time, the HOA looked small, and the people looked strong. As the sun set, Sam stood tall, his heart steady. The battle was nearing its end, and he was ready for the final fight. The court order had given the community new strength, but Sam knew the HOA would not stop until the final judgment was passed. Martin was too proud and too stubborn to accept defeat. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread that the HOA was planning one last strike. Some said they were reaching out to wealthy developers in other states. Others whispered about hidden money being funneled through shell companies. Whatever it was, everyone felt the storm was building. Sam spent those days preparing. He walked the neighborhood, speaking with families, reassuring them, making sure they knew they were not alone. Veterans kept visiting, and their presence gave courage to everyone. Children waved at them like heroes from a storybook. But inside, Sam carried a quiet worry. The court battle had dragged on for months. He was strong, but he wondered how long his neighbors could endure the pressure. One evening, Paul rushed to the cabin with news. "They've scheduled an emergency HOA meeting," Paul said. "They're voting to approve a deal with a new developer. If it passes, they'll claim the land is theirs again, and they'll try to rush construction before the next court hearing." Sam nodded slowly. "Then we'll be there. They can't hide anymore." The night of the meeting, the HOA office was packed. Board members sat stiffly at a long table, Martin at the center with his sharp suit and cold smile. But this time, the chairs behind them were not filled with silent homeowners. Instead, dozens of families crowded the room, standing shoulder to shoulder. Veterans lined the back wall, arms folded, their presence commanding respect. Martin tapped his gavel. Order. This meeting is private. Only board members may speak. Sam stepped forward calmly. You made a mistake, Martin. This isn't private anymore. The people you tried to silence are here. Tonight, they speak. The room erupted in cheers. The board members shifted nervously. One by one, neighbors stood and spoke. A mother described how she was fined for her children's bicycles left near the porch. A retired man spoke of being threatened with foreclosure over a flower bed. Martha, leaning on her cane, said clearly, "You took from us because you thought we were weak. But we are not weak anymore." Every story hit harder than the last. The weight of years of unfair control filled the room. Martin tried to interrupt, his voice sharp. These complaints are irrelevant. The board operates by law. The land belongs to us. But Daniel, standing near the front, raised a folder of papers. Not anymore. We filed a motion this morning. Evidence of fraud, intimidation, and misuse of funds. Tomorrow, the judge will review it. If accepted, not only will Sam's land be restored, but this HOA may be dissolved permanently. The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers again. The board members turned pale. For the first time, Martin's confident smile faltered. The next morning, the courthouse was filled to the walls. Reporters, neighbors, and veterans all gathered to witness the final ruling. Inside, the judge reviewed the motion carefully. He listened to testimonies, studied the evidence, and then leaned forward. This court finds that the HOA acted with repeated dishonesty, intimidation, and misuse of authority. The sale of Mr. Sam's land is hereby declared void. The deed is restored fully to him. Furthermore, due to overwhelming evidence of abuse, this HOA is dissolved effective immediately. Control of the neighborhood will return to the community and the county. The gavel struck, and the room exploded with cheers. Tears ran down faces, people hugged one another, and veterans clapped Sam on the back. Martin and the board sat frozen, their empire crumbling in a single sentence. Security officers moved quietly to escort them out as the crowd celebrated. That evening, the neighborhood transformed. Families gathered at Sam's cabin, bringing food, drinks, and music. Children played in the yard, lanterns glowed, and laughter filled the air. For the first time in years, it felt like home. Martha raised her glass of lemonade and said loudly, "To Sam, who stood for us when we thought no one would." The crowd cheered, but Sam shook his head gently. "This victory belongs to all of us. They tried to divide us, but we stood together. That's why we won." The words carried through the night, simple and true. Later, when the crowd thinned and the stars filled the sky, Sam sat quietly on the porch. Daniel joined him, smiling. "You've done something rare," Daniel said. "Most people don't win against groups like that. But you reminded them of something stronger than money: unity." Sam looked out across his land, where children were chasing fireflies. His heart felt light for the first time in a long while. "This place," he said softly, "was worth every fight." Daniel nodded. "And now it's yours again, just as it should be." In the weeks that followed, life in the neighborhood changed. Without the HOA's shadow, families began fixing their homes, planting gardens, painting fences. Instead of fines, they shared tools, advice, and laughter. The veterans who had come to support Sam became part of the community, welcomed as friends. Sam's cabin stood at the center of it all, no longer a lonely place but a symbol of resilience. People often stopped by just to thank him, and every time he answered the same way, "We did this together." As the seasons changed, the land flourished again. Wildflowers bloomed, the lake sparkled, and the air carried peace. The neighborhood had been saved, not just from developers, but from fear. And Sam, the soldier who returned to find his land stolen, had given them more than a victory, he had given them freedom.